Stay tuned. Ahead, I'll talk with Erika Engelhaupt about Go to Hell, a traveler's guide to Earth's most otherworldly destinations. Hi, I'm Dan Skinner, and this is Some Books Considered. Erika Engelhaupt is a science journalist and expert on all things macabre. Her knowledge of many taboo subjects, including rotting corpses, bodily fluids, and other things, reportedly make her a very popular guest at dinner parties. Her previous book is Gory Details: Adventures for the Dark Side of Science. She joins us to talk about Go to Hell. It's from National Geographic. Erika, welcome to Some Books Considered.
Thanks so much for having me. Really looking forward to talking to you about hell.
Well, in the introduction to the book, you talk about why you could have written a book about heavenly places to visit, but you didn't find them as interesting. Tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, I was working as an editor at National Geographic. I'm a science journalist, and I was learning about all of these fantastic places around the world. And one thing that really struck me was how interesting the places were that had some connection to hell, that were considered portals to hell or an underworld, and how many different cultures had a concept of an underworld. And often they were inspired by the natural places around them, the volcanoes, the caves. Many cultures have some kind of underworld that is literally considered to be underground or underwater. And that just seemed fascinating. So while heavenly places are, a wonderful place to go for a vacation to just relax, I like to say that, a visit to the hells on earth will really keep you on your toes, add some spark and sizzle to your travels. And there's so many fascinating places to see where we can learn about history and cultures around the world, but also see some of the world's most awesome and amazing sights. Some of these places really blew me away. I couldn't believe that I didn't know that for example, a volcano like Kawah Ijen in Indonesia that has blue flames rolling down the side instead of the red lava that you think of. This is just such an eerie place because you've got sulfur gases that light on fire and literally roll down the sides of a volcano. So when you see places like that, you just think, gosh, I want to see that once in my life.
Well, I want to talk to you about some more examples of those wonderfully hellish places that people can visit. But you also talk not just about the physical locations, but the concept of hell and how it's still very prevalent, but it exists both in terms of myth and religion.
Absolutely. And so, as a science journalist, it might seem a little surprising that I would end up writing a book about hell and going into all of this, background on the world's religions. But it's such an important part of our cultures around the world and so important to so many places. We've really imbued a lot of these places with religious meaning and a lot of deep cultural meaning. And so I thought it was really important to give some background of the history of hell, because I think most of us don't realize that a lot of these concepts, even though they may be somewhat different in different religions, really link us together. There really is a lot of commonality. When you look back at the ancient world, you see some of our earliest writings talk about an underworld and send heroes to explore an underworld and try to come back to the land of the living, for example. So all the way back to the Epic of Gilgamesh, the Egyptian Book of the Dead. You look at all of these ancient writings and people were fascinated even thousands of years ago by the idea of an underworld, hell. You see over time, many cultures kind of convert their place of the underworld, such as the ancient Greek idea of Hades. It started off as just kind of a shadowy, gloomy place where everyone went when they died. And over time, it became a little closer to the place of judgment and the hell that we know in Christianity today. So that kind of history, I think, is really fascinating. And you can see it and see that history by visiting many of the places in my book that I talk about that were important to different cultures over time.
Well, I want to talk about that in just a moment, but because we can't cover everything in this book, give us a brief overview. What are readers going to find here?
Yeah, so I've basically organized the book around three different kinds of what we'll call hellish places. So, one is portals to the underworld. These are places that have some link to legends or lore about the underworld or hell. So, for example, the kinds of places that you might find in that book would be places like Pluto's Gate in Turkey, which is a place where Greeks and Romans believed that this cave was an important portal to Hades. And so they built a temple on it dedicated to the gods of the underworld. That's why it's called Pluto's Gate. And they would do all of these really fascinating rituals there because the cave emitted toxic gases, which we now know are high levels of carbon dioxide. They believed that was basically the breath of hell, the breath of Hades coming out. And so they would send in animals to sacrifice, things like that. And only priests were believed to be able to survive if they went in. So that's the kind of really fascinating place you might find in the portals to the other world. And then I've got hells on earth. And these are the places that have inspired what people have imagined hell or the underworld to be like throughout history, or that just have some connection to hell, like the town of Hell, Michigan, that takes its name and runs with it. So there you might find places like the Gates of Hell in Turkmenistan, which is a flaming pit in the middle of the desert in Turkmenistan that really looks as though someone has punched a hole in the ceiling of hell and you're just looking down into this flaming pit. And then last, we have otherworldly destinations in my book. And this includes places that are just eerie, strange, that have some aspect that we associate with hell. For example, I visited Bracken Cave in Texas, and that was fascinating because it's the world's largest bat colony. And of course, a lot of us associate bats with hell. There's a whole history of that, even in art and literature. And when you go to Bracken Cave, you will see literally millions, tens of millions of bats pour out of this cave, swirling into the air, forming what they call a batnado. And it really is an underworldly sight, really amazing, very otherworldly. So those are the kinds of places that I've got in the book. And there's over 50 places. And I give a lot of the history background, even some science behind a lot of these places.
What I found interesting about your portals section is that just the wide variety of portals.
Yes.
You might think, well, if people have a certain idea of hell, that it might be just certain types. But no, there's all sorts of different portals that people have imagined as being connected to hell.
Absolutely. I mean, you've got everything from the Acheron River in Greece, which is beautiful, but that was considered by the Greeks to be the river of woe, and it led to the Greek underworld of Hades. And then you have places like St. Patrick's Purgatory in Ireland, where in the period of early Christianity in Ireland, it was believed that Jesus had come to St. Patrick and showed him a pit in the ground that led to purgatory, and that if he showed sinners this portal to purgatory, that they would change their ways and convert to Christianity. And then you've got in Mexico the cenotes, which are bodies of water, underground bodies of water that are beautiful pools. You can go swimming in many of these places, but those were believed by the Maya to be portals to their underworld, Xibalba, which was like a 9-level underworld that had, areas of different kinds of obstacles and punishments that people might face depending on what they had done in their lives. So yeah, there are all different kinds, whether it's, watery, whether it's caves and volcanoes. There's even a really beautiful one in New Zealand that I visited called Cape Renga. And instead of being what we think of as a hellish or a place of punishment kind of underworld, their idea of the afterlife is that people go to this, the soul, when you die, your soul flies to this particular place at the northwest tip of New Zealand and leaps from a particular cliff into the ocean. and it's the place where two oceans meet. And then, your soul will swim underground and emerge at a place of an eternal afterlife where you're reunited with family and so forth. So some of these underworlds are actually quite beautiful, are not necessarily places of punishment. People have had different ideas about this throughout time and history.
I'm talking with Erika Engelhaupt about Go to Hell, a traveler's guide to Earth's most otherworldly destinations. And our conversation continues in a moment. If you're enjoying this discussion, please subscribe, like, and click on the bell so you know when I post new interviews. And thank you. So tell us a bit about the research involved to put this book together. And it sounds like you enjoyed that process.
I did. I got to travel to so many fascinating places, and the rest of them are now on my bucket list, the ones that I haven't been able to go to yet. But yeah, I traveled around to a lot of different places. I went to a number of places in Ireland, in Italy, particularly around the region of Naples, and places across the US, and then all over the North Island of New Zealand, where I saw places like Cape Reinga. And so doing that was fantastic. And then also just reading so many fascinating books and talking to experts about these ideas of hell. It was really, as a science journalist, it was very interesting to me to explore that other side of, the world in terms of learning about the different cultures and religions and how people have viewed hell over time. So it was interesting to delve into some of the works on religion and world religions, and also just to look at some of the amazing art and what has inspired people throughout time, how people have envisioned some kind of hell or underworld or other world and another realm.
So how do you imagine people using this book? Obviously, there's a lot of good information to be gleaned from it, but as your subtitle indicates, this could also be a travel guide.
Absolutely. I mean, if you have someone in your life who likes to travel and likes to find unusual places, or even just might want to add on unusual or spooky kinds of destinations to the travels they're already planning, then my intention was to really give people a kind of a world tour. But even if you don't think that you would go to any of these places, I think you can get a lot in terms of just learning about these ideas of hell and seeing these amazing places. I mean, the photography, of course, this is a National Geographic book, so the photography is going to be excellent. And I think that people will really enjoy just seeing these amazing places, knowing they exist and learning the history behind them. Personally, even if I never make it to the boiling river in Peru, which is literally a river with water so hot it can boil. I love knowing that it exists, and I love seeing photographs of it and imagining what it would be like to, trek through the jungle and see this place and learn the story of the explorers who discovered it. So places like that, there are just so many of them that I feel like even if people don't think they want to go to hell, I bet you'll be surprised when you look at this book at how many of these places really amaze you and maybe even inspire you to want to visit some of them for yourself.
As you indicated, they're not all scary. Some of them are beautiful. But what was kind of the creepiest place that you visited or know about doing your research?
I mean, it depends on what creepy is for you. Everyone has a little bit of a different, level or different ideas about what creeps them out. For me, one of the most interesting creepy places that I went was a church in Naples, Italy, that anyone can go to. It's kind of off the beaten path, but it's beautiful. It's called Purgatorio ad Arco, and it's a church that was built in the 1600s and dedicated to praying for souls in purgatory. So that's the connection to hell. So you see a lot of imagery of purgatory, souls in purgatory, skulls, skeletons everywhere. And they had tombs underground, which are still there. And people would essentially adopt a particular skull or bone to pray for. This congregation became known as the Neapolitan Skull Cult, or Cult of the Dead. Not because they were a cult that worshipped human remains, but because of their, deep connection to these human remains. In a way, I thought it was really kind of sweet that people would be taking someone who may have been poor, may have died of plague, and was put nameless into this tomb, and they would kind of adopt that person and or their remains at least, and pray for them to get out of purgatory and into heaven. So I thought that was really sweet. But when I took my friend there and went down into the tombs, and you can see things like a skull with a veil on it that's considered a kind of a patron saint of young brides, she thought it was incredibly creepy. And the whole idea of adopting a skull was not for her at all. So, like I said, I think it just depends on what you think is creepy. But that was a place that I thought was creepy, but also really fascinating.
Well, there's so much more in this book that we didn't have time to talk about. Take it as a whole, what sort of new appreciation, I guess, of hell do you hope that readers will take from the book?
I hope that people will take away how much we're all actually alike, and how many cultures around the world have looked at the world around them and interpreted it in similar ways. We've faced a lot of the same problems and challenges throughout our history. I think a lot of people, for example, want to teach their kids how to act right. And so many of us have come up with an idea of an afterlife where even if you don't get caught for your sins during life, there's someone who's going to catch up with you in death. And so we've created these afterlives where people will experience judgment and experience some sort of hell. So, I think it's really fascinating to see that. And I hope that people walk away thinking, wow, even these totally different religions and cultures around the world that I didn't think I could relate to, I can see how we have actually a lot of the same ideas and have looked at the world in some similar ways.
Well, to learn more, the book is Go to Hell, A Traveler's Guide to Earth's Most Otherworldly Destinations by Erika Engelhaupt. Erika, thank you for talking with me today.
Thank you so much for having me.
If you would like to purchase Go to Hell, I've placed a link for you in the description below. If you enjoyed this conversation, please subscribe, like, and click on the bell so you know when I post new interviews. Meanwhile, here are 2 more interviews you might find interesting. I'm Dan Skinner. Thank you for watching this edition of Some Books Considered.